Denver International Airport is one of the most talked about buildings in the United States. Not because of its passenger numbers, though those are substantial. Not because of its architecture, though its white tensile roof, designed to evoke the snow-capped Rocky Mountains on the horizon, is genuinely striking. Denver International is famous because, for a significant portion of the American public, it is the airport where something is not quite right. The murals depicting apocalyptic scenes. The blue horse with glowing red eyes that has killed 2 people during its construction. The dedication capstone that bears the emblem of a Masonic organization. The gargoyles emerging from suitcases in the terminal. The confirmed existence of a vast underground tunnel and baggage system beneath the building. For decades, Denver International has fed a cultural appetite for mystery that no other American airport comes close to matching. And when, in 2018, the airport announced a major renovation of its main terminal, the Great Hall, the central spine of the building through which every single passenger passes, and then surrounded that renovation with years of floor-to-ceiling construction walls that blocked the public's view of everything happening behind them, the internet did what the internet does. It theorized. It speculated. It connected dots that may or may not have been connectable. But here is the thing. The real story of the Denver Airport Great Hall project does not need conspiracy theories to be extraordinary. The actual documented history of what happened, the contractor termination, the structural safety failures, the exploding budget, the phased reconstruction, the years of drywall hiding a project that simply would not come together, is, by any honest measure, one of the most remarkable infrastructure management disasters in recent American history. And it happened not at some remote facility that nobody was watching, but inside one of the busiest and most recognized airports in the United States, in full public view, for years on end. This is that story. To understand the Great Hall project, you first need to understand what Denver International Airport actually is at a physical and operational level, because the scale of the building shapes everything that followed. Denver International opened in 1995, years behind schedule and dramatically over its original budget, on a site northeast of the city that was chosen specifically because it offered room for a facility of genuinely enormous scale. The airport covers approximately 53 square miles of land, making it one of the largest airports in the world by total land area. The main terminal building, Renovation Terminal, is massive by any standard, a multi-story structure topped by the famous white tensioned fabric roof that has become the visual signature of the airport. Beneath and within Renovation Terminal, the infrastructure is layered and complex. There are multiple levels handling different functions: check-in, security, baggage, arrivals, departures, ground transportation, and the underground train system that connects the main terminal to the 3 concourses where the actual gates are located. This complexity is not a bug. It was designed into the airport from the beginning, intended to allow Denver to grow into one of the major hub airports of the American West as population in the region expanded. By the mid-2010s, Denver International was indeed growing. Passenger numbers were climbing steadily toward and past 60 million per year. The airport was handling a significantly higher volume of traffic than its original infrastructure had been designed for. The Great Hall, the central public space of Renovation Terminal, running the length of the building, was showing its age. The check-in areas were outdated. The security checkpoint configuration, located on the ground floor of the terminal, was increasingly inadequate for the volume of passengers it needed to process. The passenger experience in the main terminal was, in the eyes of airport leadership, not competitive with what a modern major hub airport should be offering. So in 2017, Denver International announced a plan to fix it. What followed was several years of lessons in how not to manage a large infrastructure project inside an active operational facility. The vehicle chosen for the Great Hall renovation was a public-private partnership commonly known in the infrastructure industry as a P3. In theory, P3 arrangements offer genuine advantages for projects of this type. A private consortium brings design expertise, construction management capability, and private capital to the project, taking on a portion of the financial risk in exchange for a long-term operational role in the resulting facility, typically through operating retail concessions or facility management contracts that generate revenue over time. Denver International entered into a P3 agreement with a private consortium led by a company called Ferrovial, a major Spanish infrastructure firm with a substantial international portfolio. The initial contract value was approximately $650 million, and the scope included the major structural and design changes intended to transform the Great Hall into a modern, efficient, and aesthetically upgraded terminal experience. The single most consequential element of the redesign was a decision to relocate the main TSA security checkpoints. In the original terminal configuration, security screening took place on the ground level, a space with relatively low ceilings and limited physical area for the number of lanes and the passenger volumes passing through them. The plan was to move the security checkpoints upward to level 6 of the terminal, a dramatically more spacious environment with higher ceilings and room for a substantially larger security processing footprint. This was not a cosmetic change. It was a fundamental rethinking of how the building processed passengers, and it required significant structural modifications to accommodate the new checkpoint locations and the new passenger flow patterns they would create. The project also included a comprehensive redesign of the airline check-in areas, replacing the aging ticketing pod configurations with a modern layout better suited to the way contemporary travelers actually interact with airline check-in, which increasingly means self-service kiosks, automated bag drop systems, and staffed counters concentrated for passengers who need direct assistance. New passenger meeting and gathering spaces were planned throughout the terminal, addressing one of the consistent complaints about the existing Great Hall, which offered relatively limited comfortable space for passengers waiting for arriving travelers or killing time before a departure. On paper, it was an ambitious but coherent program. The reality that emerged over the following years was considerably less coherent. The warning signs began accumulating not long after construction commenced. By 2019, Denver International officials were confronting a situation that had moved well beyond the routine challenges of large construction projects. The city and the airport formally terminated the contract with the lead contractor, publicly citing severe structural safety concerns and massive schedule disputes that had made continuing the existing arrangement untenable. The structural concerns were specific and serious. Reports at the time, confirmed by airport and city officials, indicated that concrete work performed in certain areas of the construction did not meet the required specifications. Concerns about the strength and integrity of concrete elements, significant enough that officials were not willing to accept them as a foundation for the renovation going forward. In an airport terminal that handles millions of passengers, structural questions about building elements are not abstract. They are the kind of concerns that trigger immediate and unavoidable responses. The schedule disputes were equally damaging. The construction had fallen significantly behind the timelines embedded in the original contract, and the gap between what had been promised and what had been delivered was wide enough that the city concluded there was no viable path to completion under the existing partnership structure. Terminating a major P3 contract of this complexity is not a simple administrative action. It involves legal proceedings, financial settlements, and the immediate practical challenge of figuring out what to do with a partially completed construction project inside a building that millions of passengers are still using. The termination cost the city and the airport significant money in settlement and transition expenses on top of everything that had already been spent. And it left the Great Hall project in a state that would have been almost comically bad if the consequences were not so serious. a major terminal building with years of construction walls erected throughout its public spaces. Work partially completed in some areas and not started in others. A security checkpoint relocation that was neither in its original location nor in its intended new location, and no active contractor in place to continue the work. The construction walls became, in the following months and years, the defining visual symbol of the Great Hall Project's failure. Stretching across large portions of the terminal, blocking sight lines and creating a warren of narrow, channeled passenger flow paths, these barriers were an unavoidable daily reminder to every single person passing through Denver International that something had gone profoundly wrong. They were also, as it turned out, extraordinarily effective at fueling the imagination of an internet that was already primed to expect the unusual from this particular airport. The conspiracy theories that flourished around the Great Hall construction walls were, in their own way, a masterpiece of the genre. The most persistent held that the walls were not concealing a renovation at all, but rather the construction of underground bunkers, emergency government facilities designed to shelter the powerful during some unspecified future catastrophe, connected perhaps to the existing underground tunnel network that actually does run beneath the airport. Others suggested the walls were covering the construction of additional tunnel infrastructure, possibly connecting Denver International to distant locations through means that existing engineering would describe as impossible. What made these theories stick was not just Denver's pre-existing reputation, though that was certainly part of it. It was the sheer duration of the construction walls. When you walk through a major airport terminal and encounter construction barriers, the implicit social contract is that they will be there for a defined, manageable period, and then they will come down to reveal whatever was being built. At Denver International, the walls stayed up for years. They became permanent feeling features of the terminal environment. And in the absence of visible progress or clear communication about what was happening behind them, the space they created was filled, as such spaces always are, with speculation. Airport officials periodically issued updates and progress reports, but these were frequently met with skepticism, in part because the project's credibility had been so severely damaged by the contractor termination and the documented construction failures. When the institution responsible for managing the project had already demonstrated that its original plans had not gone as stated, its assurances about the new plans were received with a degree of public skepticism that was, arguably, entirely earned. The darker irony of the conspiracy theories is that they actually provided Denver International with something the project desperately needed: sustained public attention. Because the real story of the Great Hall, contractor failures, structural safety concerns, budget overruns, years of delays, was genuinely newsworthy and genuinely damaging to the airport's reputation. The theories about bunkers and secret tunnels, absurd as they were on their merits, functioned as a kind of popular entertainment layer over a story that was, at its core, about institutional failure and mismanaged public resources. Following the contractor termination, Denver International restructured the approach to the Great Hall project in a way that reflected, at least in part, the lessons of what had gone wrong. Rather than pursuing completion as a single integrated project under one contractor, the city split the remaining work into distinct phased segments, each procured and managed separately. This approach trades some of the efficiency advantages of a unified project structure for a more modular risk profile. If one phase encounters problems, the others are not automatically contaminated. The restructured project retained the core design ambitions of the original plan. The security checkpoint relocation to Level 6 remains the central structural goal. The check-in area redesign continues as a major component. The new passenger spaces and improved flow patterns throughout the Great Hall are still in the program. What changed was not the vision, but the method of getting there, and critically, the budget. The phased restructuring and the contractor transition came with substantial additional costs, settlement expenses, new procurement processes, design revisions required to address the structural concerns identified during the original construction, and the inflation-driven increase in material and labor costs that affected virtually all major construction projects in this period all contributed to a final budget that has grown well beyond the original $650 million estimate. Fiscal analysts and infrastructure watchdogs following the project have expressed concern that the final accounting of all costs, including the transition expenses, the remediation of structural issues identified in the original work, and the ongoing construction costs across the phased segments, will push the total expenditure significantly past the billion-dollar threshold that airport officials have been reluctant to state publicly as the project's true cost. The implications for passengers are not hypothetical. Airports recover capital costs through the fees they charge airlines for using their facilities. Those fees are embedded in the cost structures that airlines use when pricing tickets. At Denver International, a major hub for United Airlines, and a significant facility for Southwest and Frontier, sustained cost increases at the airport level create sustained upward pressure on airline cost structures that eventually find their way, in some form, into the prices that travelers pay. The exact mechanism is not always linear or transparent, but the basic economic logic is straightforward. Someone pays for the $1 billion spent fixing the Great Hall, and that someone is ultimately the traveling public. The operational consequences of years of Great Hall construction have also been measurable and real. Denver International handles an enormous volume of seasonal travel, with the Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday periods representing some of the busiest travel days in the entire American aviation system. During peak travel periods, even relatively minor bottlenecks in terminal flow can create outsized disruption. Long security lines, overcrowded waiting areas, and the kind of passenger frustration that gets documented in social media posts and becomes part of an airport's public reputation. The construction walls, the modified passenger flow patterns, and the ongoing disruption to what should have been the efficient central processing area of the terminal have created conditions that airport operations staff have had to manage carefully during each major travel surge. Industry analysts tracking Denver International's performance metrics during the construction period have noted that the airport's processing efficiency, measured by indicators like average security wait times and terminal throughput, has been affected by the constrained physical environment inside the Great Hall, particularly during the highest volume travel days, when the lack of full capacity in the terminal space is most acutely felt. Whether the remaining construction phases can reach completion on their updated schedules before the next series of high-demand travel periods is a question that airport officials have answered with measured optimism, while independent analysts have maintained that the project's history provides ample reason for caution. A program that has already demonstrated its capacity to encounter unexpected problems has not, simply by virtue of new management and phased restructuring, eliminated its exposure to future unexpected problems. What the Denver Airport Great Hall project ultimately represents, stripped of both the conspiracy theories and the official optimism, is a case study in the specific and severe difficulties of large-scale infrastructure renovation inside an active, high-traffic public facility. The original failure was not primarily a failure of design ambition. The vision for what the Great Hall should become, a more spacious, more efficiently configured, more modern terminal experience, was coherent and defensible. The failure was a failure of project delivery, inadequate contractor oversight, structural quality control that fell below required standards, schedule management that deteriorated to the point of formal legal dispute, and ultimately, a public-private partnership structure that did not allocate risk in a way that protected the airport and the public from the consequences of contractor underperformance. The years of construction walls were the visible symptom of that failure. The ballooning costs were the financial symptom. The internet theories were the cultural symptom. A public that had watched an institution promise something and failed to deliver it, and had filled the resulting uncertainty with imagination. Denver International deserves a great terminal. The city has grown dramatically. The airport handles tens of millions of passengers a year. The case for investing in a modern, efficient Great Hall is genuine and strong. The question the Great Hall project forces us to ask is not whether the investment was worth making, but why it took so long, cost so much more than it should have, and left visible scars in the form of years of construction walls, terminated contracts, and documented structural failures that no amount of architectural polish on the finished product can fully erase. The cranes are moving again. The phases are progressing. The security checkpoints will eventually find their new home on level 6. The check-in areas will be modernized. The Great Hall will, at some point, look something like what was originally promised. But the journey to get there will stand as a warning, studied by infrastructure planners and public procurement specialists for years, about what happens when the management of a project fails to match the ambition of its design. Drop a comment below and tell us what you actually believe. Was the Denver Airport Great Hall project just a case of catastrophically bad project management? Or does Denver International's history make you wonder if there is something else going on beneath that famous white roof? Like, subscribe to Mega Airport Works and stay with us as we track the wildest mega projects on Earth.